here we go. So adding and subtracting fractions with negatives, there is nothing different that I'm really going to share with you that you do not already know. It's just putting the two concepts together. So the steps that we did yesterday, the 1 through 4 that we did, all of those stay exactly the same. The only difference is we have to remember our integer rules. It's the only difference. Okay? So we're going to write steps, but we're not going to write them down word for word like we did yesterday because we already wrote them all down, so we don't need to copy them all. And we're going to skip some lines. Let's do an example. If I were to give you negative 1/3 plus 3/5, instead of my first step being, am I getting a common denominator, the first step that you want to do is you want to figure out whether you're adding or subtracting, right? I want to know what operation am I going to do. Because if you don't do the correct operation, even if you do everything else right, you're going to have it wrong. Okay, so when I do this, am I going to add or am I going to subtract?
Subtract.
I'm going to subtract. Why?
Because they're different.
So I know right away that this problem is going to be 1/3 minus 3/5. Because I'm going to be subtracting. So now what should I do?
Find a common denominator.
Good. Now find your least common denominator, which is what?
15.
So my denominators are going to change to a 15. How do I get from 3 to 15? Everyone? Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the 1 times 5 is?
5.
How do I get from 5 to 15? Everyone?
Times 3.
So what do I have to do to the top? Okay, what's 3 times 3?
9.
So I have 5 minus 9. Well, what is 5 minus 9?
Negative 4.
So I have that 4 over that 15, because remember, keep your denominators the same. And then make sure you keep it a negative. Besides the fact that it's 5 minus 9 and we know that that's a negative 4, why else is it a negative number? Riley?
Because 1/3 is negative. And it's the greater number. What?
1/3's not greater.
Why is it negative then?
That's the question. That's why we're going over it.
Yeah, I got confused for a second. I thought you go 9/15 take away 5 and it'd be a positive 4 over 15.
So remember that rule when we subtract, we always do bigger minus smaller no matter what? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
So it's always bigger minus smaller because that makes our life easier, correct? So what is 9 minus 5? 4. So the question is because this is where students go wrong, is my answer a negative?
No.
Why not?
Because 1/3 was negative.
Because my 1/3 is negative and 3/5 is positive, and which number is bigger?
3/5.
So my answer should be a positive.
I was wondering.
And that is why students mess up, is because we forget the rule of always do bigger minus smaller no matter what, and then look at the negative at the end. Does that make sense, guys? Right. Yep, treat it just like you do your integer rules, and you'll be golden. Okay, so let's try another example. Example number 2. What if I do negative 3/4 plus a negative 3/5? What's that first thing I need to do?
Find the least common denominator.
Before I figure out my least common denominator, what should I do?
Whether to subtract or to add.
Good. What operation am I doing? Am I adding or subtracting here, guys? Good. I'm going to be adding. Why?
Because they're the same.
So I'm doing 3/4 plus 3/5. Now find your least common denominator. Which is what, everyone?
20.
How do I get 4 to 20?
5.
Which means my numerator is
15.
15. How do I get 5 to 20?
Times 4.
So what's my numerator?
12.
Now what do I do?
Add.
15 plus 12 is
27.
over.
20.
What do I need to do? Make it a mixed number. What do I get when I make it a mixed number, everyone? Then the question is it a positive or a negative? Why is it a negative?
Because 2 negatives equals negative.
Because I'm adding, I keep my sign the same. So, just a lot to remember, right, guys? You know how to add and subtract fractions. You know how to add and subtract integers. You're just putting the two rules together. So it's a lot to remember in one. Okay, so example 3. We'll just do one more, and this will be our last one, and we'll practice. What if I gave you 11/16, or sorry, let's do a negative 11/16 minus a negative 5/8. What do I have to do first on this problem? If you don't leave change opposite, you might do the wrong operation. So when I leave change opposite, what should this problem say? Does that make sense, everyone? So please make sure you leave change opposite first, because I don't want us to do the wrong operation. So what operation am I going to do? Am I going to add or am I going to subtract? Good. So I'm going to do 11/16 minus 5/8. What's my common denominator?
16.
So the first fraction gets to stay the same. The second fraction becomes what? What does it become, everyone?
16.
Good. Here, this makes it easy on us. 11 minus 10 is
1.
over.
16.
And then is it a positive or a negative?
Negative.
Why is it negative?
Because 11/16 is bigger than 10/16.
Good. Look at your ones that have common denominators. 11/16 is bigger, and 11/16 is my negative number, so my answer has to be a negative. Questions on that part? Alright, so back up to the steps. Let's just write them down really fast. Step 1 is really just to follow your integer rules. So follow the integer rules. Figure out whether you are adding or subtracting. And don't forget to leave change opposite when needed. finances.
Are we assuming in our book that they know how to do the integer rules? Or are we gonna have to, like, in our book, are we gonna have to say how to do the integer rules?
Nope, you can write it just like that.
Okay.
Yep, assume that they know how to do it. Step 2, follow steps from yesterday. So for your book, because you can now do your adding and subtracting fractions with negative pages, your steps, did we write them all out? Can you copy them down, essentially word for word? Yeah, you just need to make sure spelling is right, complete sentences, but your steps are on these 2 pages. Can we use the examples we did in class? No, you have to make up your own examples, but you can use the steps that I gave you. Is that understood? Questions on the booklet at all?